Welcome to the debate. Before we jump right into today's topic, we really want to emphasize that the video for this show is completely self-produced, with the design and the core idea by Hot Hot Hut Hut.
Right, a huge amount of totally original work went into that design.
Definitely. So to start us off, I want you to imagine walking across a bone-dry, cracked desert in Africa. I mean, the sun is just blazing.
And the ground is baked hard, like as hard as concrete.
Exactly. Now, a local hunter walks out onto this totally barren dirt, stops, and just takes out a shovel.
Not a fishing pole, a shovel.
Right, a shovel. He digs up a solid brick of dry mud, carries it back to his house, and puts it on a shelf.
Which just looks like a standard building block.
Yeah, but 6 months later, when he needs a meal, he takes that block and he pours a bucket of water over that dry dirt.
And that is when things get really weird.
The mud softens, it cracks open, and a living, breathing fish wiggles right out onto the table.
I mean, it is one of the most staggering visuals in the natural world. It looks entirely unnatural.
It really does. It sounds exactly like a concept pulled straight from science fiction. And, well, in fact, it is.
You're talking about the book, right?
Yes. If you have read the hit novel The ThreeBody Problem, you know about the aliens called the Trisolarans. Their survival strategy is just mind-blowing.
Oh, it's fascinating.
When their planet's climate becomes too hot and chaotic to survive, they do not run away. They literally dry their bodies out.
Like on purpose?
On purpose. They dehydrate themselves into flat, lifeless husks, wait out the extreme danger, and then rehydrate when the climate is safe again.
It is a brilliant concept in the book. It's, a way for life to hit a biological pause button.
Exactly. But we do not have to look to alien planets to find this. The African lungfish does the exact same thing right here on Earth.
It really does.
So today, we are looking at this fish's incredible ability to enter suspended animation during extreme droughts. And our core question is this: does the African lungfish prove that science fiction's most alien, brilliant concepts are simply reflections of Earth's biological mastery?
Or, on the flip side, does the intense vulnerability of this fish expose a huge gap between fictional alien supremacy and the brutal, desperate nature of real-world survival?
It is a really important distinction to make.
For sure.
I will be arguing that the lungfish perfectly bridges that gap. This creature proves that nature is a brilliant architect. Its survival mechanism is an evolutionary masterpiece that honestly matches or even beats our wildest sci-fi imaginations.
And my perspective focuses on the harsh reality of the animal's situation. I mean, the biological mechanism is definitely fascinating.
But
comparing the lungfish to powerful sci-fi aliens creates a totally false equivalency. The lungfish's adaptation is actually a desperate biological trap.
a trap?
Yes, it turns the animal into completely defenseless prey. To me, this highlights the vulnerable, sometimes brutal reality of nature rather than some triumphant alien superpower.
Well, let's start by looking at what actually happens when the dry season hits in Africa.
Right, when the lakes literally vanish.
Exactly. When entire lakes disappear, most aquatic life simply dies. There's no water. But the lungfish senses the water level dropping, and it actively prepares.
It doesn't just panic.
No, it digs down into the mud, it curls its body into a U shape, and then, and this is the crazy part, it secretes a very specific type of mucus from its skin.
And we should clarify what that mucus actually is, because it is not just regular fish slime.
Right. It is a biological sealant. As the mud dries around the fish, this mucus hardens. It turns into a paper-thin, waterproof wrapper that covers the fish's entire body.
Like a sleeping bag.
Exactly, like a waterproof sleeping bag. It traps the fish's internal moisture so it does not dry into dust, and brilliantly, the fish leaves a tiny breathing tube extending from its mouth up through the mud to the surface so it can still take in air.
That breathing tube is a key detail, especially when we talk about vulnerability later.
We will definitely get there. But inside this waterproof bag, the fish does something incredible. It drops its metabolism, the energy it takes to keep its body running, down to an absolute minimum.
How low are we talking?
Specifically, it drops to 1/60th of its normal rate.
Wait, 1/60th?
Yes. To put that in perspective, think of your smartphone. When your battery drops to 1%, what does the phone do?
It goes into that ultra battery saver mode.
Exactly. The screen dims, it force quits your background apps, it stops searching for Wi-Fi, it diverts all remaining power to just keeping the core operating system alive.
Right.
The lungfish does exactly this with its own body. It shuts down digestion, it stops growing, it slows its heart rate to just a few beats a minute.
So it's barely alive.
Barely. It runs entirely on extreme battery saver mode, keeping only the brain and heart barely ticking over.
But wait, if its heart is barely beating and its systems are shut down, how does it survive without poisoning itself?
What do you mean?
I mean, if a normal animal stops filtering waste, like if it stops going to the bathroom for months, it dies of internal poisoning.
That is exactly where the brilliance of the engineering comes in. Normal fish produce ammonia as their biological waste.
And ammonia is super toxic.
Highly toxic. In a normal lake, it just gets flushed away by the water. But if a lungfish is trapped in a tiny mud bubble and releases ammonia, it would poison itself in a matter of hours.
Because there is nowhere for the toxins to go.
Exactly. So the lungfish chemically alters its own waste process. It stops making ammonia and starts converting its waste into urea instead.
Ah, urea.
Right, which is much less toxic. The fish can allow urea to build up in its bloodstream for months or even years without dying.
Wow.
This process is called estivation, or summer sleep. If human engineers designed a machine that could sense a crisis, build its own waterproof shelter, drop its power to 1/60th, and alter its own chemical waste to survive for years, we would call it a masterpiece of design.
It is impressive, I'll admit.
The lungfish is a master of its environment.
Okay, look, the mechanism of estivation is a factual marvel. I agree. The chemical shift to urea is incredible. But I just do not buy the framing of this fish as a master of its environment.
Why not?
Because when we use words like master or perfectly engineered, we imagine a creature in total control. We imagine something like the Trisolarans from the novel.
You see them as completely different?
Fundamentally different. Let's look at the driving force behind the lungfish's design. The driving force is panic.
Panic?
Yes, this is a desperate crisis response. The fish is forced into this suspended animation because its home literally evaporates.
Well, sure, it's reacting to the environment.
But if the lake stayed full, the lungfish would happily swim around forever. It does not choose to enter a deep sleep to travel through space or build an empire like in sci-fi. It hits a biological pause button just to avoid dying of thirst.
But facing a crisis and successfully surviving it is the definition of biological mastery. I mean, the environment provides a lethal test and the fish passes the test.
It survives, yes, but look at the cost. While it is in this ultra battery saver mode, where does it get its energy? It is not eating.
It consumes its own stored energy.
Exactly. It slowly consumes its own muscle tissue. It literally eats its own body to keep its brain alive.
That's just efficiency.
It is swimming in its own mildly toxic waste, trapped in a dark hole, slowly starving. That is not mastery. That is being pushed to the absolute brink of death by the harsh reality of nature.
I think it is important to remember what we are comparing this against.
Which is?
The alternative is death. Every other fish in that lake dies. Think about us humans. We spend billions of dollars in modern human science trying to figure out how to put human organs on ice.
Right, for transplants.
Exactly. We want to put astronauts into suspended animation for deep space travel. We struggle to keep human tissue alive for even a few hours without causing massive cellular damage.
That's true.
Yet this fish accomplishes perfect tissue preservation naturally in the dirt under the blazing sun.
Look, I agree that the cellular preservation is amazing. It really is. But you cannot separate the biological function from the ecological reality.
What do you mean by ecological reality?
I mean, what happens to the fish while it is asleep in the mud? Let's talk about the living, canned food vulnerability.
Ah, the human hunters.
Right. You praised the breathing tube earlier. Because the fish needs air, it has to leave that tiny hole leading to the surface of the dry lake bed.
It has to breathe.
But that air hole is a literal beacon. Local people in Africa know exactly what those holes mean. They do not need fishing rods or nets or boats.
They just walk out there.
They just walk out onto the dry earth, find the hole, and take a shovel. They chop out a square block of mud with the fish completely trapped inside.
They dig them right out of the ground.
And they carry these mud bricks home and just stack them up in the shade. The fish cannot fight back. It cannot swim away.
No, it's totally dormant.
It cannot even see what is happening. The protective shell you admire so much actually becomes a convenient packaging for predators.
It is definitely a unique form of hunting.
It is a massive evolutionary liability. If we compare this to the ThreeBody problem, the contrast is huge.
How so?
Well, in the novel, when the Trisolarans dehydrate, they do not just fall on the ground and hope for the best. They have a massive societal structure.
That's fair.
They have enormous storage facilities. The ruling class organizes armies to protect these dehydrated husks. They manage the risk.
So they have technology and society to protect themselves.
Yes, but the African lungfish has absolutely none of that. It has no society. It is completely alone.
It's just a fish.
Right, so it wraps itself in a biological sleeping bag, buries itself a few inches underground, and just waits. It is completely helpless. Against humans, or any smart predator that figures out what that breathing hole means, the survival strategy is actually a deadly trap.
Okay, I hear your point on the vulnerability. I really do. But let's look at the science behind what the humans are actually doing. Why are they storing them as living canned food in the first place?
Because it is an easy, reliable food source.
But think about the biology of it. If you pull a normal fish out of the water, bake it in mud, and put it on a shelf in a hot climate, what happens?
Will it rot?
Exactly. It decays in a matter of days. The fact that local people can store a lungfish in a mud brick for 6 months or even years without it rotting, that actually proves my point.
Wait, how does being eaten prove your point?
Because it highlights the sheer perfection of the stasis. The biological preservation is flawlessly effective.
But it's being preserved for someone else's dinner.
The sheer effectiveness of the suspended animation is exactly why humans value it as food. The fish's body is resisting death so successfully and halting cellular decay so perfectly that it remains fresh long after the lake is turned to dust.
Yes, it resists death, but it also resists life.
What do you mean?
It is stuck in a limbo state. You are looking at the biological mechanism and praising its efficiency, but I am looking at the outcome for the individual animal.
Which is surviving the drought.
Imagine being completely paralyzed, blind, and buried in dirt, relying entirely on the hope that nobody finds you.
It doesn't have the capacity to feel hope or fear in that state.
Maybe not. But working flawlessly to keep yourself alive, just to be stacked on a shelf and eaten later, is an evolutionary nightmare. The reality of nature is brutal. It does not care about dignity or mastery. It only cares about bare minimum survival.
I do not think we can apply human standards of dignity to a fish. In biology, survival is the only metric of success.
But what a way to survive.
If the species survives, the mechanism is a triumph. But let's look at what happens at the end of the dry season, because this is where the parallel to the science fiction novel becomes truly undeniable.
You mean the waking up process?
Yes. How is this state of dehydration reversed? In the book, the Trisolarans are revived simply by tossing their dried bodies into pools of water.
Right.
It is presented as this miraculous instant resurrection. With the lungfish, we see the exact same miracle.
You call it a miracle.
It looks like one. When the heavy rains finally return to Africa, the baked ground softens. The water seeps down into the mud.
And if it's trapped in a brick?
Even then, in the case of the hunted fish, when a person pours a bucket of water over the dry mud brick, the magic happens.
The biology happens.
The water touches the mucus cocoon. The fish senses the moisture. Its metabolism ramps back up. It breaks through the softened shell, and it just starts swimming again.
Right onto the table sometimes.
It goes from a dry, lifeless-looking husk back to an active animal.
I push back hard on the idea of this being a miracle. We have to look at the passivity of waiting for that water.
Passivity?
Yes, the lungfish is entirely dependent on external forces. It is playing a game of passive biological roulette.
How is it passive if its body is actively managing toxins and energy the whole time?
Because it has no control over the trigger that wakes it up. It has to wait patiently for the life-giving rain.
Which always comes eventually.
Not always. That wait can last for months, sometimes up to 4 or 5 years in extreme cases. It is completely at the mercy of the environment.
It waits for the climate to shift?
Right. But what if the climate shifts permanently? If the rain doesn't come because of a severe long-term drought, the fish simply dies in its sleep.
That's a risk for any species in a drought.
And if a human decides to toss the mud brick into a fire instead of a bucket of water, the fish is doomed. Unlike the sci-fi aliens who use advanced computers to predict the weather and actively control their destiny, the lungfish has zero control.
It has instinct.
It just goes to sleep and hopes for the best.
But biologically speaking, that hope is backed up by millions of years of evolutionary data. The lungfish did not just invent this trick yesterday.
Now it's an ancient fish.
Exactly. This species has been around for hundreds of millions of years. It outlived the dinosaurs. It survived multiple mass extinctions precisely because this roulette works.
It works on a long enough timeline, sure, for the population.
The environment is cyclical. The dry season comes, and the wet season follows. The fish has perfectly synchronized its biology to the rhythm of the planet.
Synchronized, sure.
When you pour water on that dry mud brick and watch a fish wiggle out of it, you are watching a creature that has solved the ultimate problem of water scarcity. It takes a condition that kills 99% of aquatic life, and it just hits pause until conditions improve. To me, that deep synchronization with the Earth's cycles is a winning strategy.
It might be a winning strategy for this species as a whole. I won't deny that. But let's look at the terrifying reality for the individual fish when it finally wakes up.
Terrifying?
Yes. We agree on the mechanics of the revival. The water softens the mucus, the metabolism speeds back up, the breathing changes from the air tube back to normal gills, and the muscles engage.
It re-enters the active world.
But we cannot romanticize the physical state it wakes up in. When that fish breaks out of the mud, it is not a victorious alien army ready to conquer the world.
Well, obviously not.
Remember how we discussed that it eats its own muscle tissue to survive?
Yes, to keep its brain functioning.
So when it finally breaks free from the mud, it is starved. It has lost a massive amount of its body weight in muscle mass.
It's definitely depleted.
It wakes up weak, desperate, and totally exhausted. And it wakes up into an environment that is just beginning to recover from a devastating drought.
The lake is just starting to fill up again.
Right. So food is incredibly scarce. It immediately has to start hunting while in its absolute weakest physical state. It is an animal barely scraping by, totally vulnerable to predators.
But it's alive. Science fiction is by definition an exaggeration of reality. We do not expect a fish to build an empire or fly a spaceship.
No, we don't.
But the core mechanic, the concept that complex life can simply turn its systems off, endure total dehydration and toxic stress, and then resurrect with just a splash of water, is real. And the lungfish is the living proof.
It is a striking parallel. I will give you that.
The author of the ThreeBody problem did not have to invent new rules of physics or biology to make his aliens work. He just had to look at the extreme engineering that nature had already built.
True.
Well, before we wrap up, we need to clearly summarize where we both stand on this, because it is a fascinating divide.
It really is.
So, for my summary, I argue that the lungfish's adaptations, the waterproof mucus cocoon, the ability to safely process toxic urea, the extreme drop in metabolism, and the power to revive with a splash of water, prove that nature is a brilliant architect.
The masterpiece angle.
Exactly. The fish perfectly bridges the gap between our wildest science fiction and real-world biology. It faces an impossible environment, and it survives.
And my summary is that while the biological mechanisms are identical to the fiction, the context is everything.
The harsh reality.
Right. Fiction allows alien creatures to control their extreme environments with society and technology. Reality, however, forces the African lungfish into a desperate biological corner.
It's definitely less glamorous.
It is a harsh reality, where an animal must slowly consume its own body and become totally defenseless just to avoid dying. Being dug up from the dirt as a living brick of meat exposes the brutal, passive vulnerabilities of nature.
Well, even with our different perspectives, I think we have reached a strong point of convergence today.
I agree.
Whether we view this as a triumphant masterpiece of survival or a brutal, desperate trap, we both agree that the sheer facts of the African lungfish are undeniably mind-blowing.
Absolutely. The natural world contains survival mechanisms that rival anything a writer could dream up in a studio.
Without a doubt.
The 1/60th metabolism, the urea conversion, the long wait in the dark dirt. I mean, these are facts that challenge our basic understanding of how resilient biology can be.
It really challenges our definitions of life and death.
It forces us to keep asking questions about the extreme limits of life on this planet. There is so much more to explore about the biology of the lungfish and the broader wonders of the natural world.
It really leaves us with a profound question to ponder.
What's that?
When we look at these incredible natural adaptations, should we celebrate them as brilliant triumphs of survival, perfectly engineered to endure the impossible?
Or should we view them as fragile, desperate measures that highlight just how harsh and unforgiving reality truly is?
Exactly. It is a question every listener will have to weigh for themselves.
Absolutely.
So the next time you are reading a science fiction novel and you see an alien perform an impossible feat of survival, just remember the African lungfish.
The truth is out there.
The wildest ideas in an author's imagination might just be buried in the dry mud right beneath our feet.